The day started like any other in Sundar Pichai's quiet Palo Alto home. The soft morning light spilled through the wide glass windows, casting a warm glow on the polished wooden floors. He was standing in the kitchen, sipping his black coffee, scanning through the day's schedule on his tablet. His mind was already swimming with meetings, calls, and deadlines. Tesla had invited him to their headquarters that afternoon to discuss a joint project involving AI and autonomous driving. A project so ambitious, even Sundar wasn't sure how they would pull it off. It was the kind of collaboration that could change the face of technology. But there was a problem, one he wasn't ready to tell anyone about yet. For weeks, the Tesla engineers had been stuck on a mysterious software, bug buried deep in the code. Every attempt to fix it had failed. The error wasn't just slowing them down, it was holding the entire project hostage. They were on a deadline, and the clock was ticking down as Sundar placed his cup on the counter. He heard the faint clinking of dishes from the dining room. His maid, an older woman named Anita, was tidying up. She had worked for his family for nearly 3 years, quiet, respectful, and always smiling politely whenever he passed by. He walked over to greet her, but stopped mid-step. There she was, sitting at the edge of the dining table with his laptop open. Her brow was furrowed, her hands moving across the keyboard with surprising speed. At first, Sundar thought maybe she was just cleaning the screen or closing a window. But no, he could see lines of code scrolling rapidly across the display. He stood still, watching. She wasn't just looking at the code, she was debugging it. For a moment, he thought he must be imagining things. "Anita," he said slowly, "what are you doing?" She startled, her hands freezing over the keyboard. "Oh, sir, I am sorry. I didn't mean to." But before she could finish, the terminal flashed a single message. Process completed successfully. Sundar blinked at this. This was the exact bug Tesla had been struggling with for weeks. The same cryptic error message that had stumped some of the brightest minds in Silicon Valley. And this woman, who was supposed to be polishing the silverware, had just fixed it in less than a minute. His heart started to race. Where did you learn that?" he asked, moving closer. Anita looked uneasy, almost like she regretted what she'd done. "It's nothing, sir. Just something I used to do a long time ago." "A long time ago?" Sundar repeated, leaning in. "Anita, that wasn't nothing. You just solved a problem that's been eating up hundreds of hours of work. I need to know how." Her eyes darted toward the window, as if she were debating whether to tell him. Finally, she let out a long breath. "It's complicated," she said quietly. And it's not a story I like to talk about." Sundar could tell this wasn't some lucky guess or coincidence. This was skill real, trained, practiced skill. And there was something in her voice, a heaviness, that hinted at a much bigger story behind it. Before he could press further, his phone buzzed with a notification. A message from the Tesla lead engineer. "We're still stuck. Meeting might be pointless unless we can find a fix." He looked back at Anita, who was now closing the laptop and trying to go back to dusting. He had two choices: walk away and keep this morning a strange mystery, or bring her with him to Tesla and watch the look on their faces when they realized who had just cracked the code. But something told him this wasn't just about solving a bug. This was the beginning of something bigger, something that could change her life, his project, and maybe even the entire industry. He took a deep breath and said, "Anita, I want you to come with me this afternoon." She froze, the feather duster in her hand trembling slightly. "To where?" "Tesla headquarters," he said. "Trust me. You're about to surprise a lot of people." Her eyes widened in shock. "Sir, I can't." "You can," Sundar said firmly. "And you will." Anita shook her head, backing away slightly. "It's not that simple. If he sees me, Sundar repeated. She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "Someone I hoped I'd never meet again." The air in the room shifted. Suddenly, Sundar realized this wasn't just about a code error anymore. This was about someone from her past, someone dangerous. And now, by inviting her to Tesla, He might have just walked her straight into the one place she'd been trying to avoid. Asterisk. The rest of the morning passed in a strange haze for Sundar. He couldn't shake the image of Anita's fingers moving effortlessly over the keyboard, her eyes locked on the screen like someone who had spent years buried in code. It wasn't just skill, it was muscle memory, the kind of precision you couldn't fake. But what unsettled him more was the way she reacted when he mentioned going to Tesla. The moment she said, "If he sees me," her entire face changed. The light in her eyes dimmed, and there was this quiet, almost invisible tremor in her voice. Sundar had seen fear before, in boardrooms, in negotiations, even in political meetings. But this was different. This was personal. He sat in his study now, scrolling through lines of code on his tablet, pretending to review the bug logs from Tesla, but his mind kept drifting back to Anita's words. Who was he? Why would seeing her at Tesla be such a problem? And how did a housemaid in her late 40s know how to debug a high-level, autonomous driving algorithm that had the best engineers in Silicon Valley pulling all-nighters? From the hallway, he could hear the faint sound of dishes clinking together. She was going about her chores as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't just exposed a piece of her past that clearly wasn't meant to be seen. Finally, Sundar stood up and walked to the kitchen. "Anita," he said softly. She turned, her face composed, but her hands still busy drying a plate. "Yes, sir?" "We can't just ignore what happened this morning," he said, leaning against the counter. "You fixed something no one else could fix, and you did it in seconds." "Please, sir," she said quickly, almost pleading, "don't tell anyone about it." "It's better if no one knows." "Better for who?" he asked. She hesitated. "For me and for you." Sundar tilted his head, studying her. "Are you in trouble?" "Not anymore," she said, but the way her voice caught on the last word made it sound like a lie. He sighed. "Anita, listen. Tesla's team is stuck. If you come with me and explain what you did, we could save weeks of work, maybe months. This project could change lives. It could save lives." She put down the plate, her hands resting on the edge of the sink. Her knuckles were pale from the way she was gripping it. "Saving lives is exactly why I can't go there," she whispered, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean?" She glanced at the window, as though expecting to see someone watching from outside. "Do you know how many people died because of one small line of code, sir?" The question hit him like a weight. "Are you saying you were involved in something?" Anita's jaw tightened. "Not here. Not now. It's not safe to talk about, but if you insist on going to Tesla today, I need you to promise me something. If we see him, if I tell you we have to leave, you won't ask questions. You'll just get me out." Sundar felt this seriousness in her tone. There was no hint of drama or exaggeration. It was the voice of someone who had been through something real, something dangerous. "Who is this man?" He pressed gently. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "Someone who thinks I'm dead." The silence that followed was heavy. Sundar didn't know whether to feel alarmed or curious. But there was one thing he knew for certain. He wasn't going to let fear erase talent. Especially not when he'd just seen what she could do. A few hours later, the black sedan pulled up in front of his house. His driver stepped out, ready to take him to Tesla headquarters. Sundar was already in his suit, his laptop bag slung over. His shoulder. Anita stood at the door, still in her simple cotton sari, holding the strap of her worn-out handbag like it was a lifeline. "I shouldn't be doing this," she murmured. "Maybe not," Sundar replied. "But sometimes the things we think we shouldn't do turn out to be the things that matter most." The ride to Tesla was quiet, except for the low hum of the car's engine. Sundar watched Anita stare out the window, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The closer they got to the headquarters, the more rigid she became. When they arrived, the sleek glass building towered over them, its reflective surface catching the afternoon sun. Employees in branded jackets swiped their badges at the entrance. Walking with purpose. Inside, the reception area was bright and modern, with clean lines and the faint scent of coffee drifting from the cafe nearby. Sundar led Anita toward the elevators, greeting a few familiar faces on the way. Most of them glanced at her with polite curiosity, but didn't ask questions. The elevator ride to the fifth floor felt longer than it should have. Anita's gaze stayed fixed on the floor numbers, and when the doors opened with a soft chime, Sundar noticed her grip tighten on her bag again. The engineering floor was a hive of activity, screens flickering with streams of code, groups huddled around whiteboards, and the sound of rapid typing filling the air. The lead engineer, a tall man named Evan, waved them over. "Good to see you, Sundar," Evan said, shaking his hand. "But I've got to be honest. Unless you've brought a miracle worker with you, we're not fixing this today." Sundar gave a small smile and gestured to Anita. "Actually, I might have." Evan's brow lifted. "And you are just someone here to help," Anita said quietly. Evan led them to a corner workstation where the infamous bug was still wreaking havoc. The code was displayed on 3 large monitors, each one filled with dense lines and highlighted errors. Anita stepped forward, her eyes scanning the screen. Sundar noticed how her entire posture changed. The nervous woman in the elevator was gone. In her place was someone completely focused. Absorbed in the problem in front of her, her fingers began moving across the keyboard. The room seemed to fall into a hush, as if the engineers could sense something unusual happening. She didn't hesitate, didn't scroll aimlessly. Every keystroke was deliberate. Every adjustment precise. Then, suddenly, she froze, her eyes locked on a reflection in the monitor's glass, the faint outline of a man standing across the room. Watching her, her lips parted, but no sound came out. Sundar followed her gaze. He didn't know who the man was, but the way her face drained of color told him everything. She whispered, "It's him." Asterisk, the hum of the engineering floor seemed to fade into silence. Sundar could still see the faint movement of engineers. At their desks, the tapping of keyboards, the low murmur of voices. But in that moment, all he could hear was the sharp, shallow rhythm of Anita's breathing. Her eyes were fixed on the man across the room, and every muscle in her body had gone rigid. The man stood tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a crisp white shirt with the sleeves rolled neatly to his elbows. His hair was streaked with gray, but there was a sharpness in his eyes, the kind of calculating focus that made people instinctively wary. He wasn't looking at the monitors or the teams or even Sundar. His gaze was locked solely on her. Sundar stepped slightly in front of Anita, almost without thinking. "Do you know him?" he asked under his breath. Her lips trembled before forming the word. "Yes. Is he dangerous?" She hesitated, but the fear in her expression was answer enough. Across the room. The man tilted his head, almost in recognition, and then began walking toward them. Slow, deliberate steps, like someone approaching a rare animal they weren't. Sure would bolt or bite. "Anita?" Sundar said quietly. "You don't have to." "No," she whispered, cutting him off. "If I run, he'll know for sure." "Know what?" "That I'm alive." Those words lingered between them, heavy and strange. Like the air right before a storm, man stopped a few feet away, his gaze unwavering. "Well," he said, his voice calm but with an edge that felt almost surgical. "If it isn't Priyanka?" Sundar blinked. "Priyanka?" He glanced at Anita, who stood perfectly still, her eyes darting between him and the man. "You got the wrong person," Sundar said evenly. The man smirked, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, I never forget a face, especially not hers." He shifted his gaze back to her. "I thought you were dead." Anita's voice was barely audible. "You wanted me dead." Sundar felt the tension snap in the air. This wasn't just a past acquaintance. This was someone who had once held her life in his hands and wanted it gone. "You two know each other," Sundar said slowly, almost as a statement. The man ignored him. "You've been hiding, cleaning houses? For 3 years?" His tone was mocking now, a cruel curiosity dripping from every word. "From me?" "Leave," Anita said, her voice shaking but her eyes firm. "I have nothing to say to you." He laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "Oh, you have plenty to say." "Maybe not to me, but to the people here, to the investors, to the press." Imagine what they'd think if they knew that the woman in there. Engineering lab is responsible for the biggest safety failure in autonomous driving history. Sundar turned sharply toward her. What is he talking about? Anita's eyes closed for just a second, as though bracing herself against a wave. I told you, sir, it's not safe to talk about. The man took a step closer, his voice low but cold. How many people died, Priyanka? Remind me? Her knuckles whitened on the strap of her bag. 3. She whispered. The number hit Sundar like a punch to the gut. 3 people? Not my fault, she said quickly, looking at him now. Desperate for him to understand. It was sabotage. I tried to fix it. I almost did, but before I could, She stopped herself, her throat tightening. The man smirked again. She's a good storyteller, isn't she? But you won't find the truth in her words. Only in the files she tried to erase before disappearing. That's enough, Sundar said firmly, stepping between them again. The man's eyes flicked to him, measuring him. Be careful, Mr. Pichai. You have no idea who you're protecting. Then, without another word, he turned and walked away. Leaving a trail of unease in his wake got Anita's single quotes, shoulders slumped, the tension in her frame melting into exhaustion. Sundar guided her to a quiet corner of the floor, away from prying eyes. You need to tell me the truth, he said softly but firmly. She looked down at her hands, her voice trembling. My real name is Priyanka Rao. I used to be a lead engineer at one of the largest self-driving car companies in the world. I was part of a team that designed the first generation of autonomous navigation software. And one day, the system failed. Failed how? A car didn't recognize a red light. It went straight through an intersection. 3 people died. But it wasn't a bug in my code. Someone had altered my work deliberately. When I found out who it was, I reported it. 2 days later, the police came to my apartment to question me, and all the evidence against me was perfect, forged. I was going to prison for something I didn't do, so I ran. Sundar's mind was spinning. And him, the man who just spoke to you? He was my boss, she said, and the one who framed me. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Sundar glanced back toward the engineering floor. The man was nowhere in sight. But the air still felt charged, heavy with unspoken threats. Then we expose him, Sundar said finally. Anita shook her head. He's not just a man, he's connected. People who cross him disappear, and now he knows I'm alive. Sundar's jaw tightened. Then we don't give him the chance to make you disappear. As he said it, he felt a new tension settle. In his chest, not just the pressure of Tesla's project, but the knowledge that in stepping into this mess, he'd just inherited her enemies as his own. Before either of them could speak again, Evan's voice rang out from across the room. Sundar, you're going to want to see this. They turned toward the monitors. Anita's code, the fix she'd started before the interruption, had finished compiling. The bug was gone. The test simulations were running flawlessly, and yet, as the simulation car rounded a corner on the screen, something unexpected happened. A new error message appeared in bold red letters. Anita's face drained of color. That's not my code, she whispered. Asterisk. The red error message pulsed on the screen like a warning light in a dark tunnel. The room, moments ago, with cautious optimism, now felt as if the oxygen had been sucked out of it. Engineers leaned forward, murmuring in confusion, their brows furrowed as they tried to make sense of what they were seeing. Anita's eyes darted over the lines of output cascading. Down the terminal. She didn't even need to touch the keyboard to know. This wasn't part of her fix. This was something else. Something buried deep enough to avoid detection until the system was under stress. What is it? Evan asked, his voice sharp. It's a fail-safe override, she said slowly, her tone grim. Except it's not safe at all. If this goes live in a real car, it would disable object recognition completely. Sundar frowned. Disable, as in the car wouldn't see people. She nodded once, her lips pressed into a thin line. Or anything else in its path. Evan's eyes widened. That's not in our build. I swear. No one here put that in. Anita. finally stepped forward, her hands flying over the keyboard. The terminal's scrolling slowed as she filtered the logs, tracing the intrusion back to its source. Her fingers paused. "No," she whispered under her breath. "What?" Sundar asked, stepping closer. She hesitated, almost as if saying it aloud would make it more dangerous. The code originated from a secure repository, one that's only accessible to a handful of senior engineers and one external consultant. Sundar felt the answer before she even said it. Him. She finally whispered. The realization settled over the group like a cold shadow. Evan glanced between them, clearly sensing a deeper history he wasn't privy to, but too focused on the severity of the threat to press for details. "We have to remove it immediately," Evan said. "If this gets pushed into production..." "No." Anita interrupted, her voice firm but low. "If we just remove it, he'll know we found it. He'll cover his tracks and do it again, somewhere else in the system where we might not find it in time." Sundar understood instantly. "You want to let it stay, but tag it." "Not just tag it," she said, eyes narrowing. "Trace it. Set a hidden log trigger that records every access point, every time it's touched, every time it's moved. If we can catch him in real time with undeniable proof, he won't be able to bury it." Evan exhaled slowly. "That's risky. One wrong move and 3 people could die again," Anita finished for him. "I'm not letting that happen." The room went silent. Her voice had carried something heavy, not just determination, but guilt, the kind that came from years of living with an accusation she could never clear. Sundar watched her work. Her focus hardened into something almost unshakable. She wasn't just fixing code now. She was fighting for her own redemption, but beneath her steady hands, Sundar could see the tremor of fear. Fear not of the task, but of what would happen if he realized she was the one tracing him. 30 minutes passed in a tense, concentrated blur. The other engineers kept their distance, sensing this was more than a routine debugging session. Finally, Anita leaned back, a small bead of sweat tracing down her temple. "It's done. The trigger is in place. If he tries to alter or move this code, we'll see exactly where it comes from." "Good," Evan said, relief evident in his voice. But Sundar didn't share his optimism. "Now we wait for him to make his move." As if on cue, a shadow fell across their workstation. The man, her former boss, was back, standing just far enough to avoid being part of the conversation, but close enough to watch. His expression was unreadable, but the glint in his eyes made Sundar's stomach knot. "You're working fast, Priyanka," he said smoothly. Anita didn't look up. "I told you not to call me that." He chuckled, a low, dangerous sound. "You can change your name, but you can't change what you've done. Some things stay in the code forever, no matter how deep you try to bury them." Sundar stepped forward. "What exactly are you doing here?" "I was under the impression Tesla brought in external consultants for support, not intimidation." The man tilted his head. "Oh, I'm just here to make sure my investment is protected. After all, mistakes can be costly. And in this line of work, fatal." His gaze flicked back to Anita for just a moment too long before he walked away. Again, the second he was gone, Sundar leaned in. "He knows. Maybe not exactly what you did, but he knows something's changed." Anita's voice was steady, but her eyes betrayed the storm inside. "Good, that means he'll take the bait." But Sundar could feel it. The trap she had set might not just catch him. It could catch them both. Later, in the quiet of a glass-walled conference room, Sundar found himself looking out over the parking lot, deep in thought. Anita was seated across from him, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. "You don't have to stay here," he said quietly. "We can walk out right now." She shook her head. "And what then?" "I go back to cleaning houses, waiting for the day he finds me again." "No, I'm tired of running, sir. I'm tired of hiding. I want my life back." There was no hesitation in her tone now, only resolve. But Sundar couldn't shake the feeling that by standing with her, he had just crossed an invisible line, one that put them both on a path they couldn't reverse. His phone buzzed with a notification. He glanced at the screen. It was from Evan. Check the system logs. Now. Anita was already on her feet, moving toward the nearest terminal. The screen lit up with the log file. A new entry had been recorded. The override code had just been accessed. Remotely. And the access point was not coming from Tesla headquarters. Asterisk, the log entry blinked on the screen. A thin line of text that carried the weight of a loaded weapon. In a world of code, it didn't look like much, just a string of numbers and access time and a network location. But for Sundar and Anita, it might as well have been a trail of blood leading away from the crime scene. Where's that? Evan asked, leaning over her shoulder. Anita's eyes narrowed. It's a remote IP address, not a VPN, not masked. He's confident or reckless? Her fingers moved quickly, tracing the connection through multiple servers until the location appeared on the map. Sundar stepped closer, his breath catching when he saw it. That's not even in California. The red pin on the screen pulsed over a location in Nevada. Reno, to be exact. Evan frowned. Why would he be accessing the system from there? Anita's voice was quiet but firm. Because that's where the secondary servers are. Tesla has a data storage facility there. It's not public knowledge, I know, because... She hesitated, glancing at Sundar. Because he had me help set it up before I left my old company. I thought it was just for backups. Now I know it's a shadow vault. That's where he hides the code he doesn't want anyone to see. Sundar's mind was already racing. If we can get into that facility, we can pull the original files, the unedited ones. If there's proof he sabotaged the system and framed you, it'll be there. Evan's eyes widened. You're talking about physically going there? You can't just walk into a Tesla-affiliated data center without clearance. Anita closed her laptop, her jaw set. Then we'll have to find a way to get clearance. The decision felt reckless, even to Sundar. But he could see in her face that this wasn't just about clearing her name. It was about stopping something far bigger than the both of them. If that code made it into production, more than reputations would be destroyed. An hour later, they were in the backseat of Sundar's sedan, the California sun fading into the horizon as they headed east. The driver didn't ask questions, but Sundar noticed him glancing in the rearview mirror a little more often than usual. Anita sat silently beside him, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. I used to believe, she said softly, that if you kept your head down and worked hard, the truth would always protect you. But the truth doesn't matter to people like him. They control the story. They decide who's the hero and who's the villain. And once they make you the villain, there's no going back. There's going back, Sundar said, his voice steady. We'll prove it. She turned to him then, her gaze searching his face. Why are you helping me, sir? You don't know me? For all you know, I could be lying. He met her eyes without hesitation. Because I know what it's like to have the odds stacked against you. And because this isn't just about you anymore. If he's willing to put lives at risk to protect himself, then he's a danger to everyone. The rest of the drive passed in heavy silence, the tension thick in the air. By the time they reached the outskirts of Reno, night had fallen, casting the desert in deep shadows. The data center loomed in the distance, a nondescript building surrounded by high fences and security cameras. Its only distinguishing feature was the faint hum of cooling units and the sharp, white glow of floodlights. They parked a block away and walked the rest of the distance, keeping to the shadows. Sundar felt a prickle of adrenaline as they approached the gate. A lone security guard stood at the entrance, checking IDs. Leave the talking to me. Anita whispered to Sundar's surprise. She approached the guard with quiet confidence. We're here for the midnight maintenance window, she said, flashing a laminated badge that looked worn but official. Server Bay 3. The guard glanced at it, then at her face before nodding. Go ahead. Once inside, the air turned cold and dry, the scent of metal and ozone filling their lungs. Rows upon rows of server racks stretched out like a mechanical forest. their lights blinking in rhythmic patterns that Anita moved with purpose, navigating the aisles until she found a terminal. She plugged in a small drive from her bag, her fingers flying over the keyboard. "We don't have long," she murmured. "Once I access these files, there's a good chance he'll be alerted." Sundar kept watch, his eyes sweeping the aisles. Every distant footstep, every creak of metal made his pulse quicken. Then, on the screen, the files began to appear. Lines of code, project logs, and most importantly, commit histories. And there it was, the exact change that had caused the fatal accident years ago. The timestamp, the author. His name. Anita's breath caught. This is it. This proves everything. Before she could finish copying the files, the lights in the data center flickered once, twice, and then went out completely. In the sudden darkness, the hum of the servers faltered, replaced by the sharp echo of footsteps. Someone else was in the building. Asterisk, the darkness was absolute. One moment, the data center had been bathed in sterile white light, the air filled with the constant hum of servers. The next, it was swallowed whole by shadow and silence. Sundar could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, loud and insistent, like a countdown clock he couldn't see. "Don't move," Anita whispered beside him. Her voice was calm, but there was a tautness in it, a readiness for something she'd clearly anticipated. From somewhere deep in the server aisles, footsteps echoed. Slow, measured, deliberate. They weren't the hurried steps of a technician or the heavy stomp of security. These were the kind of steps someone took when they knew exactly where you were, and they weren't in a hurry to get there. Sundar strained to see through the gloom, but the only light came from the faint glow of standby indicators on the racks, blinking in rows like watchful eyes. He could barely make out Anita's silhouette as she crouched by the terminal, her fingers still moving across the keyboard. "We can't finish the copy without the backup power," Sundar murmured. "Double quotes, I know," she said quietly. "But I can encrypt the files we already got and hide them. If he takes the drive, he won't be able to erase them without a password. Only I know." Asterisk, the footsteps grew louder. A shadow stretched across the floor between the blinking lights. And then, as if pulled from the darkness itself, he appeared. Her former boss, the man who had framed her. His face was illuminated in fleeting pulses by the server LEDs, the alternating light and dark making his expression look like it was carved in stone. There was no surprise in his eyes, only a cold satisfaction. "I knew it was you," he said, his voice low but cutting through the stillness. "You couldn't resist, could you? All those years hiding, and here you are in my vault." "It's not yours," Anita replied, her voice steady despite the shadows pressing in around them. "This is Tesla's property, and I have proof of what you did." He stepped closer, his shoes making no sound now. "Proof? Priyanka, you're still playing the same game? You think anyone will believe the runaway engineer who faked her own death over me? I own the narrative. I own the people who write it." Sundar stepped forward, blocking his path. "Not anymore." The man's eyes flicked to him, and for the first time, his expression shifted. Not to fear, but to calculation. "You think your name will protect her? Do you think your company's influence will keep this quiet if I decide to burn it all down?" "I don't want to keep it quiet," Sundar said evenly. "I want the truth out in the open." The man smirked, but there was a flicker of tension in his posture now. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." "I think I do," Sundar said. "You're a man who hides behind systems you can control. But you've made one mistake. You left a trail, and she knows exactly where it leads." In the half-light, Anita pressed one final key. A tiny confirmation tone sounded from the terminal, barely audible, but she knew it meant the files were locked and backed up to a secure, off-site server. Even if they didn't make it out of the building, the evidence would dot her former boss. Must have noticed the subtle movement, because in the next instant, he lunged forward, shoving Sundar aside and grabbing for her bag. But Anita stepped back quickly, her grip tight. "You give it to me," he snarled. "No," she said simply. Sundar was back on his feet in an instant, moving between them again. "You're done," he said firmly. Before the man could respond, a sharp beam of light cut through the darkness. Security. 2 guards rushed in from the far aisle, Their flashlights trained on the group. What's going on here? One demanded. The man straightened instantly, slipping into his polished, authoritative tone. I'm an external consultant. These two broke into a restricted server bay. I want them detained. That's a lie, Sundar cut in, his voice ringing with authority. I'm Sundar Pichai, and I have authorization from Tesla's CEO to be here. This woman is a contracted specialist, and we're investigating a security breach traced to this location. That breach, he added, his gaze locking on the man, is tied directly to him. The guards exchanged uncertain glances. They recognized Sundar's name. Everyone did. One of them spoke into his radio, muttering about verifying credentials. The man's expression hardened, realizing he was losing control of the situation. You'll regret this, he hissed at Anita. No, she said softly. I've regretted running for long enough. Within minutes, the lights flickered back on as backup power kicked in. The guards escorted the man away for questioning. And Sundar could see the tension in his shoulders. Not fear yet, but the awareness that his story might finally be slipping from his grasp when they stepped out into the cool Nevada night. The silence between them was heavy but different now. The weight wasn't fear anymore. It was release. You did it? Sundar said quietly. We did it, she corrected back in California. It took less than 48 hours for the files to be reviewed by Tesla's legal team. The evidence was undeniable, not just of the sabotage years ago, but of ongoing attempts to insert dangerous code into the current project. Criminal charges were filed. For Anita, the news came with something she had almost stopped hoping for. A public statement clearing her name the morning it went live. She stood in Sundar's kitchen, not as his maid, but as a free woman, holding a printed copy of the statement in trembling hands. I don't know how to thank you, she said, her voice breaking. You already did, Sundar replied. You trusted me. She smiled then, a small, tired, but genuine smile. And in that moment, Sundar realized that sometimes the most extraordinary talent is hidden in the most unexpected places. Sometimes the people the world overlooks are the ones who can change it the most.